partner of Berkeley SkyDeck Fund. So I actually did not finish high school. I actually dropped out of high school. So when I was in high school, I started a VR and AR company along with my co-founder. And we worked days and nights pursuing our passion. And eventually we decided to work on our idea full time and managed to raise money and, drop out of high school. And from that experience, I learned so much about entrepreneurship and startup. Eventually, I exited from that company and returned back to community college. And here I am at Berkeley with same with you guys. So I'm currently also a junior at the Haas School of Business. So during my experience at community college, I became a venture capitalist working for Ravv. So, at 20, I joined Ravv, which is one of the fund that backs the Berkeley SkyDeck Fund, as well as Realwear. I'm always very passionate to help people, help entrepreneurs learn about how to raise money and invest into startup as well. So that's enough about me. And today it is about you, because today is all about me here providing some of my insight about venture capital. So moving on to next slide. Can you guys see here?
Yeah.
Okay. That's absolutely awesome. Okay. So when you hear the word venture capital, what comes to mind? Can anyone raise their hand? Anyone? Okay, so let's see. Okay, Yunhan?
Yeah, it's to invest in early stage companies, or you kind of purchase a portfolio company and help to manage it.
Yeah, correct. That's part of it, definitely. Who else?
Someone interested like investment and also dollar.
Mm-hmm. That's right, investment. But that's definitely part of venture capital, is to invest money into startups. But there's definitely more than that. So I'm gonna let you know. I'm gonna going through some of the things beyond the capital. So what's beyond the capital is also professional knowledge and experience that a VC provides to startups. So typically in investment, a venture capitalist helps fund high-risk startup firms and other businesses that have a high chance for acceleration of growth. A venture capitalist also invests, in rapid growing companies that appears to be very promising. And besides the funding, we also provide a professional knowledge and experience to the company to help them grow even more rapidly. Typically, a venture fund had their own investment thesis. And with that investment thesis comes from their particular experience and knowledge in a particular sectors. And therefore, there is a selection process for a VC to choose which kind of company they need to invest, because what we are looking for is the right fit and a complementary of skill set and chemistry with the co-founding team. Venture capitalists also make their return through ownership of large numbers of company shares. And that typically, when you heard about a company like Alibaba's going IPO, that's how we get our rewards. Or when you hear like a company get acquired from their strategic acquisition partners, that's how we get our return from our investment. Capital investment from private equity firm typically held about 10 years or more. As a result, some private equity firms takes an active role to determine the management of the company and direction of the business. So as we are holding some stake into the company, we also get to decide get to decide who will be the CEO and who will be the management team. Let me give you an example such as Apple. Steve Jobs was ousted by his board of director because people believe that he wasn't performing well. So VC also gets to decide who they want to have the team, who they want to keep the founder, or who they want to place the founder. But we can always see that the industry has been growing. We can see deals has been growing tremendously for the past 10 years. And from 2010 to 2020, we have seen an increase of deals and volumes of venture capital investment. But still, venture capital makes a very small portion of the overall financial industry. It is considered an alternative investment. Okay, here I'm going to talk a little bit more about if you were to establishing a venture fund, what would be the structure? What would be the structure typically look like? So we have on the left right here, we have the fund managers who are responsible for managing the funds. And as you can see in the movies or in the TV show Silicon Valley, you see all the VCs, they're like the big bosses, and entrepreneurs ask them for monies. But we all know that actually, if you're a VC, you also have a lot of bosses. Your bosses are typically your LPs. Your LPs are the one that are funding your venture fund, and typically they make up 99% of the funding for the entire venture fund. So these LPs, which is limited partner, there includes wealthy individual, family offices, pension funds who are contributing capital to the venture fund. But they do not really interfere with the operation of the venture fund. Typically, the GPs, the general partners, will be the one managing the entire fund. And as we know that the venture fund, once the fund is established, they will be purchasing ownership of other companies. So they will be investing into their portfolio companies. And here is the fund structure. You can see a venture fund acts as an investment vehicle, and they put money into different portfolio companies. Sounds curious. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about a pretty lengthy, sort of the life cycle of a fund. Typically, where we will start is at the formation stage, where during the formation stage, the fund does not exist yet. The fund is when the partners this formation stage is when the partners developing its fund strategies, preparing for their offering materials, fundraising, negotiating fund documents, and voila, the fund is born. The fund formation is fought with pearls. Especially when a fund is first effort to form a management team known as the emerging managers. The fundraising takes a lot of time from their LPs. It takes ranging from a few months, even up to a few years. And during this time, partners will prepare for their offering materials, meeting with potential investors known as the LPs, and answering any further due diligence questionnaires and requests. So the end goal is to try to drive the LPs to give you money so we can close the fund. So during this time, the partners are typically developing a pipeline known as the deal flow. A deal flow, which is the source of where the investment are coming from. How do we discover, how do we source deal, how do we find a particular investment to invest? And finally, during this time, a partner are incurring expense in connection to fundraising. So these investment expense would typically reimburse when the fund gets close. Okay, moving on to the investment stage. After the fund has formed, there is the investment stage where the fund's legal documents are signed and the fund is born. Mostly, the fund will be, most of the fund will typically last about 10 years, and eventually the fund will dissolve. But during the stage of investment stage, the fund will be will be the most active period of the fund life cycle. They will be out there and sourcing and evaluating different investment deals, as well as conducting business valuation and conducting due diligence, negotiating term sheets, and finding company to invest. This is probably the most busiest time during a fund cycle. Okay, and during this investment time, typically the fund also pays management fee, typically about 2% of the fund size. For example, if a fund have 100 million of capital commitment, they will probably pay 2% of that for the management team to manage the whole fund and pay for their salary. Once the investment stage is over, we will moving on to the harvesting stage, where we will be continue to manage our current portfolio company and trying to exit from the current portfolio companies. Typically, the exit will not be as easy. Typically, we have to find some acquisition, some companies who are looking to acquire our portfolio company, or if some of our portfolio company is doing very well, we will help them file for an initial public offering. And that typically stated the fund's term may be about 10 years. And during the harvesting time, if we cannot during the harvesting time, if we cannot harvest some of our company, we will go into the extension time, which is a phrase where we will typically GPs will have the right to extend a fund for up to 2 to 1 years. The extra time is intended to provide for GP with a window to exit some final portfolio companies. And however, it's become more common for GP to sort of continue to ask LPs for more extension time to exit the deals. And after the extension phase, typically a fund will go into their dissolve phase. So meaning the fund will probably dissolve if there isn't a second fund coming in. Okay, moving on to the startup financing life cycle. So at the picture here, you can see there are the startup financing life cycle. You can see there are different stage in terms of different stage in the startup life cycle. There are the seed stage, there are the early stage, and there are the later stage. And during the seed stage, this is the most risky stage in a company, where the company is experiencing a valley of death. So meaning they are not making money, or it's hard to break even, or they're still finding their product market fit. Most of the company in the C stage, I would say about 90% of the company will fail typically at the C stage. Then moving on to the early stage consists of series A, B, C. This is when most of the M&A, the acquisition happens. And these acquisition typically comes from financing acquisition, or either a strategic acquisition. And then in the later stage, we can see is when company already become profitable, they can either choose to merge with another company, or they can choose to go on to IPO. So this is a very fruition stage typically for a venture capital firm, because when company goes IPO, we make a lot of money. Let me tell you some of the things that are different between VC and PE, because a lot of people has asked me before, what's the difference between VC and PE? I would say they're both considered as private equity, but they're typically focused in a different stage. For example, I would say VC is focusing more in the earlier stage, and the PE focus more on the later stage. And also their goals are different, right? For VCs, we're looking at 10x to 100x time of return. For maybe a private equity, we're only looking at 2 or 3 times of return, because this is a less riskier stage. And let me tell you a little bit about the valley of death. In this stage, typically investment comes from angel investors. So those will be writing a smaller checks. Those will be wealthy individuals, or the 3Fs, the 3F, friend, families, and fool. They will probably invest in company in the earlier stage. And so on, we will be moving towards the institutional VC, then going into PE, eventually IPO. So that makes up pretty much a startup financing life cycle. The bottom line is to show you what a startup financing cycle looks like. Okay, looking at some of our exit strategy and some of the past top 25 VC-backed exit of all time. I would say the most abundant investment exit method is IPO. That is when a company goes public and share is being realized. The blue one here shows you some of the IPO with the greatest amount of return. Generally, this exit method is used by PE, and VCs will probably invest in C round or earlier, or some VCs maybe invest into later stage, some of the bigger ones. The most common exit method, I would say, is equity premium. As mentioned, that because company can go public, as VC invests in the company very, very early, the cost to acquire some of their share is very low. Therefore, in the later stage, is more likely that they can sell the stocks in a very, very high price. In between that is equity premium, which is how we as a venture fund make money. And another method for VC to exit their investment is shareholder repurchase. This situation is when the founders wants to buy back some of the share from VC because they want to take more control of the company. So typically, there will be some sort of agreement in the term sheet that highlights how shareholders will purchase at a premium. So it kind of triggers a repurchase agreement when signed with the VC. And another exit method, as we all know, is when a company actually fail bankruptcy and liquidate, and that is that is another method of exiting from a company. Some of the regulatory along the line with VC and private equity firms. So we all know that the financial industry is really managed by SEC. So the private equity firm must register with SEC. Same with VC. We must register with SEC to have the proof of capital. So a proof of capital, I believe in United States for a venture fund is typically $5 million. So that is how you're being qualified as a venture capital firm. So as a venture fund, you cannot just go to people and tell people that you're a VC just because you're a VC. You need to get accredited. So this is served to protect our startups as well as protect some of our consumers as well. Okay, so I'm gonna explain to you the process of getting an investment as a startup, how to get investment. I think with this 3 bullet points, it's too simple. This is probably the simplified process, but I would say only 1% of the company typically get funded. And the process really involved with a pitch deck. First of all, what's a pitch deck? A pitch deck is like a love letter that an entrepreneurs will propose to a investor. And what's included in there will be their business plan and also how would they spend our money. And typically a pitch deck will consists of their business model, their mission statement, their value proposition. But I would say, as someone in the venture industry, I receive a lot of pitch decks, and after we collect these pitch deck, we will evaluate and do our due diligence on the companies. So that due diligence process will be the venture partners evaluating. Will be the venture partner evaluating their technical as well as the strength of the founding team. So that will be probably evaluating the company from all the aspects. And finally, if the deal is going through, we will push the deal into our investment committee. And as if the discussion with the investment committee is if the discussion with the investment committee is going through, then we will typically move on to the term sheet stage, where we will give a term sheet highlighting all the investment term and sending that to the founders. If the term sheets are signed by both parties, still not yet. If term sheets are signed by both parties, that means we come to an initial non-binding agreement. That, however, term sheet is non-binding. So if we haven't wired the money to a founding team, that means you're still not getting that investment yet. So what highlights an investment is what really signifies that a founding team gets an investment is really when the VCs wire the money. And with that, I want to plug in a little bit about some of the website that you guys can go to for if you guys want to learn about if you guys are working on a startup and looking to get funded. Here's some website link that you can go to: Berkeley SkyDeck Fund, Ravv, and SkyDorm Fund that you can take a look at. And here's my contact information. You can scan the QR code for my LinkedIn, even my WeChat. You can add me there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And let me know if you guys have any questions.
Oh, hello, Howard.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, thank you for coming, and I really enjoy your talk. I have a couple questions. So you have worked in Bali for a long time, so you must have met a lot of entrepreneurs. So what are some top qualities of entrepreneurs that a venture capital is looking for?
Yeah, I would say some of the top quality, I would say is, first of all, is self-motivation. Second of all, because typically in a venture world, no one's gonna push you, right? You're gonna have to wake up every day, and no one's gonna remind you or when the assignment is due, when the homework is due. You gotta have to set your own schedule. And second thing I'm looking for is um, learning the 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 learning skill, right? Or the ability to learn, right? If you in the venture world is really constantly changing, right? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So for founders, it is very important for them to learn and adapt to new situation as well. But some other things that we're really looking for is also a founder market fit. So if the founders' skills are complement with the market that they're pursuing, for example, someone's pursuing a problem that it's related to bio, and his background is he had a 20-year experience in the bio industry. So that will be a founder market fit. So that will be something that we're looking for within the founder.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I have a question related to East Asians. So in the Silicon Valley or in the United States or in the world, do you recognize some situations where like East Asian entrepreneurs didn't receive as much found as other people, or do you have any tips for, especially East Asians entrepreneurs like us, for us to get better support from the VC funds and things like that?
Yeah, Alan, I can attest you to that. That is a situation really happened in the Valley for East Asian. Um, so what happened is, it's actually I think it's actually a pretty white dominated industry, because typically the largest fund you can see like Sequoia or Carter Parkin, these large firms, um, it's very hard to get funded if you're not in that circle. And as East Asian, it's typically pretty hard to enter into that circle. As a VC yourself, right? It's very hard to enter into that circle, because in that circle, you get the best deal, right? Because they have the big brands. Most of the entrepreneur will get attracted by the big brands. So it's pretty hard for them to enter into that ecosystem. So maybe as a East Asian entrepreneur, you will find that you will always stuck in the same circle with the people who look familiar to you, I would say. So that's the situation currently in Silicon Valley, and how I feel as East Asian. But I will say some tips for for maybe a East Asian entrepreneur. I would say, I don't know, you just gotta put yourself out there, and building a relationship with these venture capitalists, and hopefully through that you can it will be well prepare you to get funded. And there's a lot of resources out there as well. For example, the Berkeley SkyDeck Fund. If you're in Berkeley, it's gonna help you, get an investment. Also, I would say funding part is actually something that we shouldn't be worried too much about. The most important thing is to build your product and find that product market fit early on. Because what I tend to encounter is that founders are focusing too much on raising money. They eventually raise a lot of money, but they forget about what gets them started, right? They forget about the problem that they're trying to solve, and they focus too much on raising money. Eventually, they raise a lot of money, but they raise a bunch of money, but without solving the problem for their users, their consumer. So what I believe is, you really need to stick to the ground and, work on your product that serve your user. So
Awesome. Thanks for the advice. It's very insightful.
thanks.
And yeah, for all the Toppa members, if you ever dream about, start your own company or start your own product, something like that, this is a great chance to ask Howard about this. All right, that's
Yeah.
all questions I have.
I can take any questions, even personal questions, but
Yeah, sure. I'll ask a question right now. So I think you talked about like due diligence. So like I assume like, you get a lot of pitches from different companies with different like technical backgrounds. Like it's impossible to like know about every single technology. So like what do you typically like search for then? Like how do you like research and get the knowledge in order to like actually understand what these companies are doing?
yeah, thank you so much for this question. So typically we will have advisors on board in our venture fund who we can reach out for help if we have a specific really technical sort of aspect that we don't understand ourselves. And I would say typically the due diligence process for us will be, digging a lot of research into the technology itself, and also the founding team is a resource as well, because they ask for an investment. They probably need to prepare to explain, the concept to you as much as possible. So.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great answer.
Oh, I have one question. So I'm thinking, like, could you give us some advices, like if people who want to go into VC like industry later on, like after graduation? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question, Mary. I would say first of all, I think going into VC early at the early of your career is typically very, very rewarding, because you can get to learn about so many different industry. One advice I would say is to try to find an internship before you get a full-time offer. So in a venture industry, to get an internship, that is very different from traditional investment banking recruitment process, or maybe a consulting recruitment process. There are really no timelines, or even job postings are not displayed out there. So to be able to find an internship, what I would suggest you is to have coffee chat to contact these venture capitalists and have coffee chat with them. And what I know, one of my friend, he was offered an internship because he had a coffee chat with a partner, and he even offered to do, source deal for free for this partner. So, and also like he writes his own due diligence and send it to this partner, right? It's like a 10-page due diligence to send to this partner. Who doesn't like people that, really passionate and willing to work for them without any compensation? But I would say, a lot of VCs, they really want to get deals. They really want to get really want to get to know founders in the top universities like Berkeley. So I think, if you offer to source deals for these VCs, I think this is a really great way to start. You can also connect with me. I can also help you find an internship in this area. And I think my firm right now, we are also offering some internship position as well. So feel free to contact me afterward.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, so I'm while you were talking earlier, I was both listening and looking through experiences. Excuse me if this seems kind of rude to like browse your LinkedIn while listening to your talk. But
I was LinkedIn too.
but I was just fascinated by your experiences and what you're doing right now. So I wanted to know a bit more, like how were you able to transition? You talked about dropping out of high school and then going into venture capital, coming back to school while working full time. I'm like, how do you balance everything, and what gives you the drive to do all those things? Because I think like everybody at Berkeley to some extent is very capable of doing great things, but a lot of us, especially someone like me, sometimes I don't find this, like the motivation and also the direction to do the things I want to do. So what gave you the ideas and what pushed you to do those things? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would say, Sam, thank you for that. I would say I always focus on the why, right? Why gets me started, why I want to do this, right? So initially, when I started my first company, the why is I want to solve this problem for my user. I want to solve this problem for this population of people, and I want to create a solution that can solve this problem, and this problem will not be something that struggle them forever, right? So
Yeah.
this is the kind of intrinsic motivation that I have, because I want to solve problem for my users. And second of all, the journey that I have is not very, I would say, not always happy, right? So, typically, in the East Asian culture or in the East Asian family, we value education a lot, right?
Yeah.
And dropping out of high school, it, it is something unacceptable to my parents at the time. So, the story behind what I do or behind all my titles isn't always a love story. So, that typically isn't that easy. So, does that answer your question, or you can
Yes,
ask more
yes,
follow-on
it
questions?
does. I just find you to be super brave for doing those things that I just find very unconventional, especially given like an East Asian background. And I would say maybe like because I can tell that you're a very calm and like, how would I say, analytical person. So like I would never have imagined that you would be able to make these like very brave decisions, given like how careful you seem to be when doing all those things. So
Yeah, but I would say when I was in high school, I wasn't like that at all. After that was after experiencing so much hardship. I you know I have I almost break up with my co-founder at the time, right? So that story you won't hear on stage, right? That's the typical story that you really won't hear on stage. But I would say sometimes I also struggle too, right? Since we're at Berkeley and sometimes we're going through all the recruitment cycle and we're seeing other people are doing this and other people are doing that, we get this kind of imposter syndrome, right? So sometimes when we see somebody's posting like I got an internship or that, that typically makes me wonder, like, is my path is the path that I'm taking that is unconventional really rewarding or not? Should I really get a 9 to 5 job or not, right? So that's a question that I raise to myself as well sometimes. So I believe that you're not really alone in that process. So we're all here, young and passionate, trying to find our direction as well. So
thank you, Howard.
So I have a question about Haas. So you mentioned that you're like also a junior at like the Haas School of Business. So I guess could you kind of relate how like Haas is like helping you with like the more like techie side, or like with venture capital? Or
yeah, thank you for that question. So I think at Haas, I typically find a lot of people, definitely they want to go into IB or investment banking, but overall, I think there are some Haas people who wants to go into entrepreneurship or these kind of entrepreneurs who are building their own teams or solving problems. I think it's a really good sort of deal flow pipeline for me to look for potential investment opportunities. But how Haas has helped me, I would say we at Haas, we probably have some resources such as the Haas fund that funds about $5,000 if you have an idea related, to entrepreneurship or something. So I think that's some of the resources that Haas provide. But I would say the value of Haas is really the people at Haas. Those are the true value of Haas. But yeah, that's pretty much how the Haas entrepreneurial system has helped me, I would say.
Yeah, so the emails are already automatically recorded. That's good. So that is the end of our first indoor meeting. Let's give a last round of virtual thanks and round of applause to Howard, and thanks for his time, and he's organizing the slides and get us introduced to venture capital, and he's sharing his experience.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
You too, Howard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow if you're coming to the bonding, and next week for our weekly GM meeting next week.